Okay, so I've been given a green light to kick off. I suspect that more participants will join us as we begin, but I wanted to start off by introducing myself. My name's Councillor Alexander Amon. I'm the chairman of Richmond's Transport and Air Quality Committee. We've got various other panelists this evening with us who I'll get on to in a minute, but if I might just do a very brief introduction by just saying that the purpose and the driver behind this evening's meeting. Clearly the works that began on the Manor Circus roundabout recently had some very significant impacts on transport, which in turn had significant impacts on people's lives. I'll turn to that in comments a little later. But what we're doing with this evening's meeting, notwithstanding the various dialogue we've been involved with TfL and other stakeholders to try and get material improvements to those arrangements, is to make sure that residents from this borough have an opportunity to raise questions, to understand a bit more about the nature of the works, what's happened in the past, what we've been doing and what we aim to do going forward. And also in the spirit of recognising not this council, nor indeed any of the public bodies that are on this call necessarily have a monopoly on knowledge, is also to hear from you about any ideas you may have for things that could indeed make those works move more smoothly and improve the impact on your lives. I'll say a little more in a moment, but I think just for the purposes of this evening, I just got a sort of few housekeeping rules. In a moment, I'll introduce some of the panelists, but what I intend to do is very quickly move to a short presentation from Transport for London, who are the lead public body relating to the works on the A316. We then want to move as quickly as we can to this sort of question and answer dialogue, which due to the sheer numbers of people that have registered for this event, we're conducting through the Q&A functionality that's available. At the end of your submissions of Q&As, we have officers working away, impartial officers of the council, who are purely making sure that there's nothing in the way of offensive material within those questions, or that there's no repetition from questions that have already been covered as we go on through the evening, to allow us to get through as much of the questions that residents have about this as possible. So I'm not going to take any more time at this stage. I'm just going to do some brief introductions. We have with us this evening, as I said, myself, Councillor Mansfield, who's the Deputy Chair of the Transport and Air Quality Committee. From Richmond Council, we've got two senior officers, Nick O'Donnell, who's an Assistant Director for Traffic and Engineering, and Camillus Donnelly, who's our Head of Network Management. We've also got with us a number of Transport for London officers, including Poppy Windsor, Community Partnerships Lead South, Sophie Michelle, who's Principal Sponsor Surface Major Projects, Belinda Lidgate, who's Project Manager Asset Delivery, Sam Greening, Principal Sponsor of Healthy Streets, Carl Peary, Project Manager Capital Delivery, Nick Owen, Head of Network Performance, Rosie True, Head of Bus Delivery Service, and then from the contractor who's working on site, Eurovia, we have Simon Waters, who's the Stakeholder Manager, and Kieran McPhillips, who's the Operations Manager. Also present with us this evening, I understand we've got a number of other councillors, including Councillor Gareth Roberts, Leader of the Council, Sarah Olney MP, the MP for Richmond Park, Councillor Nancy Baldwin, Award Councillor for North Richmond, Councillor Richard Warren, Award Councillor for North Richmond also, Councillor Ian Craigie, Award Councillor for Kew, Councillor Claire Vollum, also Councillor for Kew, and Lisa Fenn, who's a Principal Engineer for Richmond Council. We have apologies from Munira Wilson MP, the MP for Twickenham, Councillor Richard Pine, one of the Ward Councillors for North Richmond, and Councillor Alice Bridges Westcott, a Ward Councillor for Kew. Before we move to the TfL presentation, I just want to start by saying one very short reflection, which is this. Richmond Council entirely understand the concerns that residents have about these works. They're important works, as you'll hear from the TfL presentation, but I want to be under no illusions that Richmond Council are as concerned about the functioning of the road network as many of the residents who've joined this call. And I want to take the opportunity right off the bat to apologise on behalf of the council for any inconvenience that has been caused by these works. As you'll hear during the course of this evening, the council have worked tirelessly to try and improve on the situation, and we aim to explain some of that and also hear whether there's more we can or should be doing. But at that point, I just simply hand over to Transport for London to give a very brief presentation about the past, present, and foreseeable future relating to these works before we move to the essence of this evening's meeting, which is the Q&A. So thank you, and I'll hand over now to Poppy, who is going to lead off the TfL.
Good evening, and yeah, thank you for the introduction, Councillor Eamon. So yeah, I'm Poppy Windsor, and I'm in the local communities and partnerships team at TfL, so I'm a stakeholder engagement manager. Yeah, we have a really short presentation which will hopefully answer some of the key questions that have been coming through to us before we obviously go to the room for all of your questions and thoughts. I just want to introduce this by saying that this has been a really complicated project. It's obviously a main arterial route. It's on a roundabout, above a railway bridge, above Network Rail lines. And we've been planning this for a significant amount of time and planning those mitigations for the traffic through our kind of normal processes. And we put in place mitigations, but clearly it wasn't enough. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to apologise for all the disruption to everyone's lives and their businesses. And I also want to thank everyone who's fed back to us so far and worked with us, particularly the borough, who have been like a key partner in trying to manage these issues with us, and including the local councillors as well, who've been raising residents' concerns with us. It has helped us respond more quickly to issues on the ground. And before I pass over to my colleagues for the kind of substance of the presentation, I want to say that this session won't be the end of the conversation, and I'll be back at the end of the presentation to tell you how to contact us if you aren't already aware. And we want to keep listening to you, and that will help us manage the situation going forwards. As you'll hear, there are some mitigations we're putting in place now, and what we need to hear is how well they're working, if we need to do other things, because as much as we can monitor it, it is really helpful having that feedback. So that's, I won't waffle on too long, and I'll pass to my colleague, Sophie.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Sophie Michel, the principal sponsor for the structures team. I'll give you a quick brief on the work we're doing over the railway bridge, and then I'll pass on to my colleague. So as you can see, you have a few pictures in front of you, and that shows you the type of defect we have on the railway bridge. Those defects were identified via a number of inspections we've had over the last few years, and it indicates that there's quite a large volume of water ingressing from the top going under and probably creating those defects, as you can see, the cracks and the potholes on the roundabout. The waterproofing that is meant to be protecting the bridge seems to have failed. We need to really replace that waterproofing membrane to really keep that asset safe and operational. We've introduced a number of interim measures to keep the railway bridge as safe and operational as possible. Those interim measures are really introduced in exceptional circumstances when we really have concern that the waterproofing membrane is not effective anymore. And those interim measures in the case of Manor Circus are really meant to protect the railway operation underneath, because we're quite concerned that with the amount of water going through the roundabout, there could be some concrete falling onto the railway that could really lead to a catastrophic failure there. Those works that we're doing on the bridge have been introduced on our program back in 2014. They are quite complex. We've gone through the design. We've tried to go ahead with doing the works as quickly as possible. But we are at a point now that if we do not replace that membrane, the waterproofing membrane, we could have some serious issues on the railway underneath. I'll pass it on to my colleague after that. I think Sam, maybe, for the next slide.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Sophie. Just seeing my video will come on. Doesn't seem to be. Oh, there we go. Hello. Thank you, Sophie. So I'm going to talk about the safety critical improvements that we're we're going to be delivering as part of the roadworks at Manor Circus. So just as a bit of sort of context, in London, TfL is working to eradicate deaths and serious injuries on our transport network by 2041. Part of this work includes designing the street environment that reduces risk of road collisions resulting in injury. And this is done by transforming junctions which we know are unsafe, and ensuring safety is at the forefront of the design that we deliver. So we know that the previous layout of Manor Circus was unsafe due to its location on top of the railway bridge, as referenced. All approaches to the roundabout are uphill, and this obviously restricts sight lines. And the location of the previous zebra crossings were very close to the exits of the roundabout, which sometimes resulted in vehicles queuing back onto the roundabout when people crossed. So using collision data recorded by the Metropolitan Police, we found that in the last 5 years, 10 collisions took place where the old zebra crossings were likely to be a contributing factor. And 7 of these 10 collisions resulted in injuries to pedestrians and motorcycle riders. There was also a gap. The previous layout resulted in a gap in the east-west cycle network. So people cycling were expected to dismount off their bikes and use the zebra crossings to cross the roundabout, which we know this is a barrier for some people that are unable to dismount. And actually, over the last 3 years, there's been 2 pedal cyclist injuries on the roundabout itself, of which 1 collision resulted in a serious injury to the individual. So to improve safety, as part of this project, we're going to be delivering signalized crossings, so push-button controlled crossings, pedestrian crossings on all 4 of the joining roads. And these will be wide enough for people walking and cycling to share. We'll also be widening footways, designating those as shared use. And then when the centre of the roundabout has been restored, obviously at the moment in that sort of picture in the first slide, you would have just seen a sort of big mass of concrete that's obviously underneath the previous roundabout. Once the roundabout's been restored, we'll be planting a number of biodiverse sort of species in the centre. These have been chosen to require less maintenance and, importantly, prevent any further damage to the bridge structure in the future. So as part of this, the future scheme has been designed to reduce collision risk by more than 50%. Importantly, where we can, some of these works have already been undertaken so far in the last month, and many of the others will take part in parallel with the bridge deck works that Sophie mentioned. And after the bridge works have been completed, the remaining safety critical improvements, they will cause less disruption to the network, as the junction will be able to operate as a roundabout again. And this will obviously allow traffic to flow more normally on the A316 and neighbouring roads. Thank you. I believe I'm passing on to, forgive me, I'm managing the slides, so I will see. Passing on to my colleague, Nick.
Thanks, Sam. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name's Nick Owen. I am Head of Network Performance for Transport for London, which means my team are responsible for the operation of the road network, and in particularly the operation around major work sites and major disruptive events like we've got at Manor Circus at the moment. So tonight I just want to talk to you a little bit about the process that we follow in doing that, and talk about some of the key challenges that we've had in terms of the works that we have at Manor Circus at the moment. So with any major set of works like this, the first thing my team will do is, in close collaboration with borough officers, is have a look at other works and other activity that we have in the area. And that's there's 2 purposes for that, really. Firstly, we will look at competing works, so works that are on the network that might impact or increase the impact. But also we work with the utility providers and various roadworks promoters to understand whether or not we can actually do more work within a closure, which will reduce disruption overall. So I know there's been a couple of questions that have come in before today's session around why Cadent Gas are operating on the network in Richmond at the moment, and that is very deliberate because Cadent Gas have a plan to replace some gas main within the same area. That was a project they were hoping to bring forward over the next 12 months. By working closely with them, we've brought that forward to be done at the same time as Manor Circus, because it can be done with little or no additional impact. And what that will do is actually save us in the region of 35 days of roadworks further down the line. So the last thing we wanted to do is go through a very major scheme at Manor Circus, and then within a number of months have Cadent Gas come back in and do further works in the same area. So I think that's a bit of a success. It does allow us to minimise the overall disruption, although I appreciate it may look a little bit strange to see these multiple roadworks out there at the moment. We also then, as I say, look at works that could provide cumulative worse impacts, and we look to defer those. So there's a good example there on the slide of our own works at Kew Bridge. We had some survey and investigation works planned. We've taken those off of the network at the moment, and they won't be allowed back on until we believe the network is better suited to cope with those. So there are a number of other sets of works that we've worked with Richmond and with the utilities to make sure are pushed beyond the window of the Manor Circus main phases. So what that does leave us to deal with, though, are some other works that are on the network. So there are safety critical works, such as the Highways England works on the A4, which we believe are interacting with Manor Circus, and also emergency works and some works when they go wrong. So the A4 works, we've worked closely with Highways England. We've changed the traffic management in place on the A4 in order to provide more capacity. And that's something that's happened over the weekend, which has hopefully contributed to some of the improvement this week. And I'm also conscious that there are some works on the A205 at the moment with temporary traffic signals, which have been undertaken by Thames Water. The intention had been that those works would have been cleared by now, but unfortunately, due to some complications on site, they are still there. So we've worked really closely with Thames Water to change the way they manage those works and also to expedite getting them off the network. And I am pleased to be informed by my team that they should be clear by tomorrow. Next slide, please, Sam. So in terms of why these particular works are so impactful, I was just going to invite Carl in to talk a little bit about the access required for the project to go ahead, and then I'll come back and talk about why that causes us a problem in terms of network management. Carl? Have we lost Carl, Poppy?
I think we might have, unfortunately.
We might have lost Carl. Okay, so I mean, I wouldn't want to second guess what Carl was going to say, but I think the issue you've seen from certainly the first slide in this presentation is the complexity of this job is very significant, and as a result, there is a significant amount of the road space required to allow our contractors to access the bridge deck in order to make those safety critical repairs. What that means from our perspective is that the roundabout can no longer function as a roundabout, and that's the reason that we've had to bring in temporary traffic signals onto Manor Circus, and that is one of the key challenges for us in terms of this set of works. The reason for that is clearly the road being designed as a roundabout, it isn't designed to be a signal controlled junction, and as a result of that, the temporary traffic signals do not operate particularly efficiently. The reason for that is there are long gaps between the different exits or the different entrances to the junction, and as a result, every time the traffic signal phase changes, so effectively one light changes from green to red, there is quite a long period while traffic clears the junction. Sorry, I don't know what's going on there. There's quite a long phase before the next signal can go green. So I know, again, we've had feedback that there appears to be long periods of time where nothing moves on the junction. That is the result of what we call these safety clearance periods. And one of the challenges, which I'll talk about in a moment, that we've tried to address with the closure of Sandycombe Road, is to reduce some of that inefficiency within the junction management. When will the phase of works end? Again, we are confident that should be the most disruptive phase, which we're in at the moment, should be completed by mid-December. Next slide, please, Sam.
Nick, sorry, did you want me to, I think you can hear me now.
Oh, Carl, I can hear you now. Did you want to talk any? Yeah, do you want to come in, Carl, about the works themselves?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry about that, everyone. Technical issues. Yeah, so the current traffic management visible on site was installed on the evening of the 13th of September. This being our second phase of works, which is the works to the bridge deck, which my colleagues have touched on already. As a result of this being the second phase of works, we began to occupy the northern section of the roundabout. The reason for taking up such a significant amount of space is due to the nature of the works, the machinery that needs to get into the works, and the operatives out on site carrying out the works. Early on in the project, the option to close the whole roundabout was considered, but owing to a number of variables, including obviously the disruption, bus diversion routes would be quite excessive, access for businesses and schools, the option wasn't practical. So in an attempt to minimize the length of the program and also keep the network running without shutting the whole roundabout, it was decided to split this work on the bridge deck itself into 2 halves, with phase 2 and then phase 3 of works. In regards to some of the concerns on long pedestrian diversion routes, we did explore options to maintain the pedestrian walkways around the currently occupied area. However, due to the safety concerns and the spatial limitations, it just wasn't feasible. I think Nick has already touched on phase 2 is due to complete at the end of October, with the next phase and the flip to the southern side of the roundabout starting in November, and this should be finished by mid-December. I'd just like to say on the end of that, we're working with the borough and the network teams on the best way to make the switch between the northern section and the southern section as least disruptive as possible, and learning from the lessons that we've found on the commencement of phase 2. So yeah, thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Carl. I think next slide, please, Sam. Rosie.
Hi, I'm Rosie True. I'm head of bus service delivery at TfL, which means I have the operational responsibility for the bus network at TfL. Obviously, the kind of buses themselves are delivered by our operating partners, but we work with them on how that works. So, on top of the mitigation that Nick has just described, obviously that's the biggest impact on mitigating bus journey times. Just really clear that our priority is still to provide the connection that the bus network needs to provide. It is there for everybody. It's there where people don't go, and for everyone with accessibility needs. It's obviously kind of vital connection point for everyone in the area. So that is really our priority, to maintain our connections and our journeys. So on top of the mitigations that Nick talked about, the road network in general, obviously have sort of bus specific interventions that we then look at once we kind of know the level of delay. So kind of covered there, allowing more time in schedules. That's either kind of looking at the timetables or adding more buses in, but conscious that adding more buses in adds to the congestion, adds to the delay. So it really is a balancing act. Cutting back services, which we've done here on the R68, it is not an intervention that we particularly prioritise, just because it does lose a connection, conscious that it means people have to change buses, change stops if they're getting to their end destination. So the mitigation we put in here, because of the severe delays, is not one of our go-to ones because of the impact that it does have. And then diversions, again, takes us away from the line of the route. We do try to avoid it, but we've also got a diversion on the 110 since the road closure went in as one of the mitigation measures. But I think Nick's going to cover that in a little bit. We really had to find that balance between the service to the customer and the deliverability due to the network conditions. So it is hard. I do empathise with you. I'm trying to run a reliable bus service for people that they can still get on, kind of despite these works as well. So I do empathise with what's going on. It has been a tough time for us too. And I suppose the last part is that we do have sort of service control in real time. So as much as we have our planned mitigations in for the bus network, there are real time interventions that will have that further impact. So particularly during the kind of the peak times, particularly where it's been the worst, probably as the TM went in, there might be sort of more cutbacks, a bit of service control. And what our operators are doing there is obviously when the delays are quite serious, we're kind of getting into some safety concerns with our drivers. They kind of drivers' hours and bits and pieces like that. Really have to kind of make sure that our network is operating as safely as possible and safe for our drivers. So there will be kind of additional service control in real time that will kind of be on top of the mitigation that we're putting in place. But yeah, just to kind of hopefully reassure you or emphasise that we are kind of trying to provide the best and most reliable bus network that we can given our road conditions. So I kept it short and sweet, hopefully, and I think I'm passing back to Nick.
Yeah, afraid so. So this is the crux of what I was going to say, really, which is what are we doing to actually manage Manor Circus? And Councillor Eamon and Poppy have apologised, and I would add my apology to that. Management of these type of impacts is not an exact science. We've got a fantastic team at TfL that do this, but we do sometimes get things wrong. And I think on this occasion we did get things wrong on the 13th, and we've moved pretty swiftly, I think, to try and resolve that. So we took feedback from a range of stakeholders on this, and there was very clear concern about road closures being part of our plan. And as a result, the layout that we put in on the 13th of September looked to keep all 4 arms of the junction operating. Hindsight is a wonderful tool, isn't it? That was clearly not the right thing to do, and that became apparent very quickly when we saw the level of impact that the works were having on the road network. We did do a few things that I think led us to believe that we would be able to cope. The signals, this is a bit technical, I'm afraid, but the signals that we put in on Manor Circus are connected to our urban traffic control system. That isn't normal for roadworks, but it does allow a greater level of control from our control centre at Palestra in central London to manage them. And also, we set up a very clear monitoring approach with the control centre to try and ensure that we could step in and mitigate those impacts where they were viewed. The impacts were greater than I think we had anticipated, and as a result, we've moved swiftly to close Sandycombe Road from the 22nd. What that does is it's a much simpler operation for the junction, and it reduces the amount of inefficiency within that signal operation I was talking about earlier. We do consider road closures absolutely the last resort. We try to balance our interventions to cater for all road users, whether that be local residents' access, whether it be the bus network, or whether it be the more strategic movements along the A316. It's not something we do lightly. My personal view on it is we probably should have moved to a road closure from day one, and we will learn from our experience here and make sure that we are much more robust in terms of management where we've got these really significant works going in. The early indications, so since sort of Monday this week, I was speaking to the team again today. Our view is that the area is still congested. I'm not going to suggest everything is back to normal, but certainly we are experiencing significantly less congestion than we did last week. I think our buses are reporting about a halving of delay in the area, which we're pleased with. As a result, there's no intention at the moment to do any further closures or any further interventions, but I'm sure that will come up in the questions later. But we are continuing to monitor the area, and of course, should things change, we do have contingency plans up our sleeve should we need to implement them. Sam, next slide. So do I pass back to you, Poppy, for next steps?
Yes, thank you. So I think hopefully that's given everyone a flavour of how complicated this project is and what we've been doing to try and mitigate some of the works. I think what's vital to us is that we keep listening. I mean, as Nick says, we do our own monitoring, but actually if we can have eyes and ears on the ground telling us where things are going wrong or any issues you're facing, either through your local councillors, or please do ring us 24 hours a day. The number is here, or you can Google it, or you can access it through our website where there's a form, and whatever you prefer to do. I believe the phone line is the most accessible form to get in touch with us. But yeah, just again, thanks to everyone who is feeding back, and obviously we'll keep working collaboratively to try and fix these problems as they continue. And I think that's it from us. That was a real whistle-stop tour, hopefully, of the issues we're facing, and gives maybe everyone here a little bit of a sense to think about ideas about how we can improve matters going forward.
Okay, thank you very much to the TfL colleagues. I think I don't want to elongate this, we'll move straight to questions, but only to say, I think, for all that there were undoubted failings in the original sort of traffic management, I think that, as has been alluded to here, the speed of response, the way that Richmond's council officers and TfL have worked collaboratively to try and provide improvement in the situation, I hope is recognised by residents, even if, as we say, there is still some disruption, and undoubtedly there will always be some with the nature of this work. But the speed of response and the way that we push, to be frank, for some road closures to try and push through the traffic on the 316, I hope is appreciated by residents who've probably seen some improvement in the situation. I think all I'd say now is that, in the spirit of that, I think what we want to do this evening with questions is move to a kind of comply or explain principle. This council and TfL, I think, want to be leaning into resident suggestions wherever possible, but where we can't, for good reason, we should do our very best to articulate the reasons why. So hopefully you'll hear a balance of that. I should just mention just one other point of
detail. I do understand we're also joined by another councillor who I didn't mention earlier on the call, Councillor Tony Patterson, who's one of Mortlake and Barnes Commons councillors. So thank you, Tony, for joining and representing your residents as you have done throughout this process. First question from Paul Hodson is about the crossings. The new crossings, will they be one phase? If they stay as two phase, he says the result with zebra further down the hills will be to slow down crossing for pedestrians and bikes. Who's going to take that? Poppy, I saw you speak, but no sound.
Oh, sorry, is this Sam?
Yeah.
It's probably one more for our network performance. Sorry, Nick. If you can just comment on I believe that the zebra crossings will not be UTC.
Okay.
Sorry, not zebra crossings, the new crossing, sorry.
So this is about whether they're staggered or straight across. I don't know. That would be one of the sponsors answer that?
Oh, I thought the question was around the timing of the crossings.
No, it's whether the new crossings will be one phase or they stay as a two phase.
Oh, if we're talking about sort of the number of times you have to cross on the way across. So for the northern and the southern arms, so Manor Road and Sandycombe, they'll be straight across crossings, not too far back from the old position of the zebra crossings.
Okay.
On the A316 itself, the east and west arms, they will be what we call staggered. So effectively, you'll have to cross it in two stretches. We are looking to time those in a way that you're not, as a pedestrian, you're not sort of waiting in that central reservation to cross. It will sort of be timed in a sensible way. But the reason we do that is for safety and to reduce the distance that you have to cross.
That's fine, Sam. I think, this is clearly there's interest in what will follow, but I think we probably ought to focus, given the interest, on the specific impacts of the works as opposed to the outputs at this stage. So if I move then to Ken Harvey, who's listed quite a number of questions, but I think for fairness, because we've got over 200 questions listed, we'll only be able to take one of yours, Ken, at this stage, and I'll take your first one. For TfL, why not work 24 hours on the site? Can you perhaps explain very briefly what the present work pattern is and whether there's any capability of broadening that to as much as 24 hours or anything more than you're presently doing? Who'd like to pick that up?
I'll start off. We are currently in conversations with our contractors on the possibility of this. I believe we've got two of our contractor colleagues on the call that might be able to give a bit more information. Hopefully they're still on the call.
I can see.
Yeah,
Simon.
sorry, Carl.
Simon.
Sorry, Carl. So
Thank you.
the first part of that, we are looking at the program with respect to whether or not there are efficiencies to be gained and whether or not the program can be accelerated by changing the working hours. It isn't always as simple as achieving what we think you might achieve by just working 24 hours a day. There are lots of consideration, lots of factors that need to be considered when talking about going to a 24-hour a day model, and you don't necessarily get the efficiencies in that that you might expect. But we are looking at the program, and we are looking at how we might speed the program of works up, whether that's by just extending the normal day shift or working in a split shift model. Once we have run those numbers to see what we would gain by changing those shift patterns, we'll present that to TfL, and if that works for everybody, then hope we may see a change in shift pattern.
Okay, so I mean, this is something, just to reiterate, this is something Richmond Council have raised with TfL, and I know TfL have been looking at it, and we hope very much that it may be possible to increase the hours of operation, recognising nonetheless that more hours don't always necessarily equate directly to material improvements in the speed of delivery, though I would expect some yield there. Can we just move then to, I've got next Peter Brown. Why not reduce the signal time? Sorry, things are moving on this screen as I speak. Why not reduce the signal time to westbound A316 traffic at Chalkers Corner and eastbound A316 traffic at Richmond Circus to balance throughput to the restricted capacity of Manor Circus, reallocating green time to the side roads at those junctions. Anybody got a view on that? I mean, it's quite a specific proposal, but could more be done to sort of manage the flow into Manor Circus, I guess is the spirit of the point.
So that is part of what our control centre will do on a daily basis, and that when I was talking about the monitoring earlier on, they can make those changes live. So and as you'd appreciate, it's a balance right across the area to make sure that we're not relocating queues to other areas where it will cause other issues. But I mean, it's a good point. I will pick that up with the team and make sure that they've fully considered that. But as I say, I think that is one of the strategies we would have looked at.
Okay. New question from an anonymous attendee. When will the Cadent roadworks on the lower Mortlake Road brackets A316 finish?
I can take that one. Those ones are emergency works. They were due to complete this week. I believe reinstatement has begun. So hopefully by the end of the week, if not early next week, they should be finished and wrapped up.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Joe Glynn asks, how long will the concurrent works on Clifford Avenue go on for as they're contributing? I think you said earlier you've had reassurance they should be completed tomorrow.
So yeah, the Thames Waterworks, the temporary signals should come out tomorrow. Whether that will mean the site is completely clear, it may take a few more days for that, but the main impact from the temporary signals should be clear tomorrow.
Okay.
And just to be clear, that is an overrun. That phase of works should not have been continuing at this point when we did the planning.
Can I just ask on that front, will you be fining the contractor for that overrun?
It's an overrun of the phase, not an overrun of the total works. I'd have to take some legal advice on whether that's allowed.
I would hope that you're using whatever powers you can to have compelled them. That's all. I think our residents.
We are, Councillor, and I think the other point, they have changed the mode of operation down there, so they've put staff in to manually manage those temporary signals to make sure that they're not just on a fixed timing. So they are adjusting them, so that's reduced some of the impact there as well.
Okay, I've got Charlotte Baker. She's asking, what messaging will TfL and the council be putting out to encourage people not to drive while the work is taking place and to take alternative forms of transport? I mean, if I just say briefly on this, I mean, we've worked together with TfL to try and expand the network of advanced signage, which will point out to people attempting to come through the area, that there is significant transport disruption. So that's one element. I think what Ms. Baker is getting at more broadly is about whether or not there's a broader messaging piece for discouraging car use at the get-go, if at all possible, through this area. Is that something TfL have done anything on? No comments?
So we have some channels to discourage car use, and obviously that's something that we're aiming to do all the time a little bit. But yeah, so the main thing that we can do are those VRM signs to head off the traffic as early as possible. We've done things like letter drops to local residents, but obviously that's more warning them about the works rather than discouraging car use. But obviously people would want to replan their journeys as much as possible. We also send out CRM emails. Unfortunately, so what that means is anyone who's registered on our website for various things like congestion charge, or if you get the buses and you've signed up for our updates, you'll receive emails in the local area because we can have a look about who's using the network in that way. But again, it's people who've signed up, we do TPR and everything like that. So that's somewhat limited impact, but we do see those small things contribute to a reduction in car use.
Sure. Okay, thanks very much. Next question is from someone who says they live by Manor Circus. How are we going to ameliorate the sort of impacts of these works ongoing until June 24? I mean, obviously TfL gave a presentation on what you've done so far and what you aim to do, but I just add to that from a council point of view, because we haven't added additionally to that. from the point of view of idling specifically, we have put out additional signage to inform drivers to switch off when they're stationary. We have no formal legal powers that we can use relating to stationary, as it were, traffic in stacked in queues. We're not able to take action against them, but we have instructed our enforcement officers to spend time advising drivers to switch off wherever possible to reduce the impact of stationary emissions from vehicles. But TfL, do you want to add anything else to sort of the amelioration point?
I think probably to stress, Councillor, that the most impactful phase of these works is through to mid-December, after which we would expect the impacts to be greatly reduced. But we will continue to monitor, and we will continue to do everything we can to mitigate the impacts in the short term. Okay.
We've got a question from Judith Colliver, who says, why is the exit from the A316 to the A316 from Stanmore Gardens Rally Road not being closed? I would just say that on this, unless TfL want to add anything further, or Richmond Council officers, this road and indeed Castlegate are subject to kind of live consideration of whether or not those road entrances do need in any way to receive additional measures. And I think if we take action on that, we'll probably be in touch with residents within coming days. If there's no one else that wants to come in off the back of that one, Tony Greaves has asked a broad question, which I'll try and summarise, which is that he said that the TfL, part of the rationale for the works here was around sort of a safety improvement for pedestrians. Can you say a bit more about the nature of the collisions that have taken place? And maybe you don't have the information to hand, but about whether or not this is a sort of hotspot in TfL concerns for collisions.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I sort of did touch on it a bit in my presentation. I don't know when Tony's question came in. It's not. It's outer London, so it doesn't have the sort of the nature of collisions that we would expect in, say, Holborn or King's Cross. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that we would not look at making an improvement here. And the aspiration to improve safety here is more than a decade old. It's something that TfL and Richmond have been talking about for a long time, not just for pedestrians, but also for other traffic users and vulnerable road users.
Okay, fine. Ian Hughes has asked, with so many vehicles idling at the lights, is there any pollution monitoring being done? And I think, in short, the answer to that from a council perspective is we have a series of monitoring points all around the borough, so we will have data. My view, for what it's worth, though, is that rather than sort of observe what is patently obvious is a material degradation in air quality from stacked traffic, we're trying instead, through the changes that were made in Sandycombe at our request and through the actions of our enforcement officers, not spending time ticketing vehicles but encouraging people to switch off. We're trying our darndest, frankly, to try and reduce the impacts of emissions wherever possible, but we're open to, frankly, to other ideas if we've missed something. Is there anything TfL want to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, air pollution is a priority for the Mayor of London, the chair of our board. Air pollution monitoring is a bit of a tricky one for short-term impacts. We get seasonal peaks in air pollution, and when we monitor for air pollution, it's normally over a longer period of time. Of course, if you've got congestion increase, that's not going to be great for it. But it's difficult to pick out week to week even what the impact of that is. The best thing we can do is try and resolve this as quickly as possible, obviously, and think about large-scale air pollution intervention.
Okay, thank you. I got a couple of questions I'll roll together because they're both on the R70 bus route. Some are saying, will extra buses be put on as it's severely affected? And another is saying, why is it necessary to reroute the R70 bus? TfL say they've done it because of the Manor Circus roadworks, but they've now stopped the service between Richmond and York House. This is disruptive. Can we reinstate the R70? And if necessary, can't they turn the bus around at Richmond Circus? I indeed understand that one of our officers from the council, David Tidley, wrote to TfL along these lines too. Does TfL have anything they want to say about the bus service there?
Hi, yeah, I'll pick that one up. So extra bus is an interesting one where we've got kind of a large level of delay because yes, it helps. Yes, it can help from a passenger perspective, but actually, if we're just adding more buses into the kind of the general congestion, then it can make it worse as well. And actually, putting more buses in to actually take quite a long time to get there, we really have to think about the benefit. So the R70 strategy we kind of got at the moment, the changes for the R70 were to kind of mitigate the impact of cutting back the R68. So that's kind of our plan, sort of pre-works and kind of using our knowledge and our operators' knowledge. As per kind of Nick and the TM and the lights, we are constantly reviewing this. I have got a couple of specifics that we are looking into from Richmond and stuff like that. So yeah, I suppose through the questions, any real specific can you do X, Y, Z? I probably need to take those away, think about those in the round and how they work best for the bus network from a safety perspective, from our operator perspective. But yes, we can, all those specifics I can take away and get a more detailed answer to afterwards once we kind of think about all the suggestions that come in.
Yeah, it'd be fair to say that the council are in a dialogue with TfL about that subject. I think, I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that the counterfactual until we took the changes on Sandycombe Road was it really didn't matter what level of bus provision was actually being provided. It was absolutely gridlocked and wasn't actually performing a very reliable service at all.
Yeah.
So
and I think once we've kind of confident that all the other kind of road network changes are in place and that this is our stable position, then we can really think about kind of more longer term changes to the bus network for this kind of phase up to December, rather than kind of being really quickly reactive on the bus network now, and then maybe there are further changes to the road network, because it is quite a difficult process.
Okay. Next, I'm going to take a couple of questions that relate to a similar subject, which is from Alistair Johnson and from someone from Athena Road. The first question is, are we going to be tougher as a council, this Richmond, on giving contractors permits for roadworks on our roads during this period? And relatedly, someone's noted the the Mortlake High Street works by Caden, and saying it's not great planning. I might invite officers from the Richmond side to come in on this, but I've been directly involved in looking specifically at the Mortlake High Street works, which are gas works. And while officers may say a bit more about our general approach of toughening our stance in relation to works in and around the Manor Circus environment, sadly, the works on Mortlake High Street are considered safety critical. They relate to gas leaks that are taking place in the area. And so despite the fact that I was very minded to rescind the permits associated with those works, if indeed it was correct and proper to do so, the feedback I've had via officers of the council, via the utility provider, is these works are absolutely necessary. So sadly, we will have to accommodate them with as minimal disruption as possible. It wouldn't be responsible for the council to turn our head against works that we know are serious in nature and will require, if they're not undertaken, remedial works to take place throughout the same period anyway, at much the same level of disruption. But does anyone from Richmond Council side want to say anything more broadly about the approach we're taking to works in the area?
Yes, just to come in on the works on Mortlake High Street. So I did lights just yesterday, and we've been working with them, and we've managed to change the program. So we've changed to work with them over the coming weeks to try and maintain traffic flow as much as possible. Obviously taking into consideration what their readings are and what impacts putting up 2A lights will have. As for the immediate area, we've put a embargo in place with a 1 mile radius of any non-essential works. We're working with a number of utility providers as well, and we've reached out to them to make them aware of the situation and just ask for their cooperation. So we have rejected a significant number of permits over the last few weeks, just trying to push off works that are non-critical. Obviously, that doesn't apply to immediate emergency works, but again, if they do happen, we will work quickly with those to ensure they're cleared as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. I got a question from Sunil Kalra, who says that will anything be able to be done to sort of improve on the disruption during school drop-off, I assume, pickup times, as his child, he says, has had to sort of wake up 90 minutes earlier. I mean, just from the Richmond side, I guess what I'd say is fundamentally the presentation that's been given, as we've all had a joint focus on trying to make sure the 316 corridor functions better. We continue to look at whether or not there's more we need to do. On public transport, I would just say that the disruption that people who are getting to school by bus are facing has been something that we've written out to South West Railways about, asking whether or not in any way they could find it within their good character to accept free travel on the bus network transposed onto their rail network, to enable some to make the journeys via rail instead of over road surface. We haven't had an answer to that yet, but the council have been pressing to see whether or not, you know, some of the providers in the borough can assist with that. Does TfL have anything more you want to say about sort of the difficulties at certain peak times, particularly at sort of drop-off time for school? If not,
it's fully understood. We monitor throughout, so our control centre operates 24/7. So that obviously the morning and evening peak are key focuses for us. We will continue to try to intervene in order to improve things. I don't think there's anything specifically we're targeting at school times other than that general level of monitoring and mitigation.
Okay. Teresa Bullock has asked, why is the inside lane going towards the roundabout at Manor Circus, I think from the west, closed with, I think, you know, various different equipment from TfL's contractors, when it could be a filter going left into Sandycombe Road, thereby easing traffic going towards Chiswick Bridge? I know that's something that we have discussed with TfL. Is there an answer to that? Is that one for the contractor?
I can take that with respect to, if I'm understanding the location correctly, along Lower Mortlake Road, where our compound is positioned.
Yeah.
We did look at a number of options within the surrounding area, obviously hoping to not impact the carriageway. Unfortunately, I see that there's one or two questions about why the home base car park wasn't used, for example, or the Sainsbury's car park. We'd engaged with both of those. We also engaged with the owners of London House, where we're located outside now. Sadly, none of those were prepared to allow us to take space in their space, so we were effectively forced to use where we're located now, unfortunately.
Okay.
I'm sorry, may I come in here, Councillor Amon? It's Councillor Nancy Baldwin here.
If you're incredibly brief, Councillor Baldwin, because I want to get
incredibly brief. This was something I brought up, and there is TfL land right there where they're using it as a bus stand. It's a triangular piece of land, and they were going to go away and see whether or not that could be used. I was wondering whether TfL have come to some conclusion about whether their land could be used for this canteen area.
So that's something TfL have an answer to at the moment, or is that something you want to get back to Councillor Baldwin and myself over after this meeting?
I'm in communication with buses on it. Their first response is no, for obvious reasons. They're still using it, but obviously, if they were to not use it, then that could change things.
Okay.
But currently, no.
Okay, we'll work on that. Okay. Someone's raised, would it be possible to make the 316 one way until December and completely reroute the other direction? They allege there's a huge amount of road capacity. I think it's Alistair Johnson here. I think clearly it would relieve capacity on the signal phasings to do such, but I think the question would be, where would the alternative flow go? Is that something TfL have considered? I mean, certainly wouldn't condone the alternate flow being on residential roads of Richmond Borough.
So there have been various options considered, Councillor, including a full closure. But I think, as you rightly say, the redistribution of traffic as a result of that would be very, very significant. And I'm not sure the alternative routes really exist in order to be able to cope with that.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to lump questions together that seem to have been repeated in some form. Someone's asked, how can Thames Water be issued with a permit and the length of the times these works last on Clifford Avenue? So I guess in essence, why were those works allowed in the first place on Clifford Avenue?
So the most disruptive phase of those works on Clifford Avenue were the ones with the temporary traffic signals, which should have been completed by now. So, you know, I do have well, as I'm sure my colleagues have a degree of sympathy with works promoters. It's not always quite as easy as a job appears. We've worked really closely with Thames Water on that. They've been very accommodating in terms of the way they've managed that site. As I say, they will be clear from tomorrow, which I think will have a positive impact. Well, the signals will be clear from tomorrow. I think there's another phase of works there, which will mean they're on site a little bit longer. But the bulk of those impacts should be resolved tomorrow. It is frustrating, but it is unfortunately an occupational hazard with some of these works.
Okay. Somebody has asked, I think Justin has asked, might it be possible to open up Richmond Park to traffic, at least as a temporary measure between Sheen Gate and Richmond Park, which would take pressure off? Just on that, I mean, I don't know that TfL will have anything to add on that, given that they wouldn't have control over the Royal Parks. But we know from engagement we've had with Royal Parks that is not something that they are seeking to do. It was subject to quite considerable consultation to close Sheen Gate, and Royal Parks, as the ultimate masters of what take place within Royal Parks, you know, are not minded to reopen the gate to offer a sort of bypass opportunity. So I think that option, frankly, is closed, given that the council have no authority and TfL have no authority over Royal Parks land. John Price has asked, why not ban right turns and make the 316 two-way? Buses going east go via the fire station turn, and then the pedestrians have the Pelican crossing. I'm not sure whether you follow that, but any thoughts, TfL?
I think we would be, if there are proposals for other road closures for banned turns, council, we would happily discuss them with borough officers and see if we can make those work. I wouldn't comment on the routing of the bus. I think Rosie might be better placed to do that. But I mean, you know, we would not rule anything out. If there are proposals of that nature, we'd be supportive of trying to make them work with you.
Okay. Anne Ray has asked, with regard to the membrane that was referred to on the bridge, how long has this membrane been in place? She says that normally these membranes, as she understands it, have a life of about 25 years.
Yeah, I'll take that question. I'll have to go back into our records because we have a number of bridges, so I want to make sure I give you the right information. But I believe we are either at the end of the design life or we are about to get to the end of the design life. And it's correct. The waterproofing membrane has a 25 years design life.
Okay. So is it your instinct, Sophie? I mean, other than knowing,
yeah,
this has been in situ for over 25 years, or?
I would say we're there or thereabouts, yes.
Right. Okay. I've had I see a couple of questions relating to the introduction of the yellow box junction outside the fire station. Some are saying that it's quite an impediment to get into Sainsbury's, as there's not free space to enter past the yellow box. Could anybody from TfL comment on the sort of functionality of that yellow box and whether or not you've designed it with a mind's eye to entering the Sainsbury's facilities?
Yeah, so the sorry. Yeah, so the yellow box junction was a safety critical piece of work that we did that was flagged up as a result of the tailbacks along Lower Richmond Road. We needed to do the sufficient width of the carriageway to allow vehicles or multiple vehicles coming from the fire station out and able to either go westbound on Lower Richmond or get into the central reservation so they can go eastbound. That's the reason why for the size of the yellow box. Sam, I don't know if you was going to add something more to that.
No, that was it. Thanks, Carl.
Okay. KH has said Manor Grove is a residential street. It's not a residential parking zone. I think by that they mean a controlled parking zone. Cars park either side. There are 3 primary schools. Basically, would it be sensible to make Manor Grove one way from Manor Road up to Lambert Avenue, to stop it being used as a rat run. What I'd say on this is in engagement with ward councillors, we've considered a range of temporary options, including just that. And it's felt that actually the best short-term option for speed and also to not exacerbate speed, which one way might have the tendency of doing, we intend to bring forward some proposals for passing places on Manor Grove to ameliorate the impact of traffic meeting traffic in the short term. But we'll continue to monitor whether or not that's a sustainable solution or if something different needs to be implemented in the future. I don't know if anybody else wants anything to add on that. Probably not from TfL, but just if anyone from Richmond Council does. Okay, if not, I've got, can speed enforcement on the side roads be reported or acted on? I think TfL, I assume as part of your works, there's no active monitoring of speeds on the adjacent road network. No. No, so I think
no, not in terms of enforcement, council. We look at flows and we try to understand how traffic is redistributed. But no, enforcement would probably be a matter for Metropolitan Police.
Okay. I mean, obviously, we've been on site. We've seen the situation. We've seen some of the issues that are occurring firsthand, and I think it's important for us not to spend undue time monitoring. I think where we see an obvious issue, we're looking to try and course correct rather than monitor over too long a sustained period. I've got a question from a resident asking, will the roundabout that succeeds the one that's been taken out be any smaller than the one before? And will there be more definitive lines for cars to stay in lane? Do we have an answer to
that? Yes. Wondering if Nick O'Donnell can also help me with this. So we've been talking to we've been liaising with Richmond for a while about putting in lines around the centre of the roundabout, which we're calling it's a turbo style arrangement, which facilitates safe cycling north-south as well, something that Richmond asked for us to consider as part of the design. The actual footprint of the centre of the roundabout will be smaller, and there will be an overrunnable area to allow HGVs such as trucks accessing Sainsbury's to safely use that junction, as well as coaches, which we believe you turn around to go to and from Twickenham. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just trying to avoid any repetition here because there are some mentions of the same things. I've just got, Chris asks, can the temporary traffic lights at the top of Manor Road, just before the roundabout, stay green for longer than a few seconds? Only 3 or 4 cars can go through at a time.
So all the lights are controlled by our urban traffic control system and should be optimised in terms of keeping traffic moving. But can I take that one away, Council? And I'll just check there's not a problem with them that's meaning they're on green for too short a period of time.
Okay, a couple more. Someone's raised that they drive past at 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. And they say they also travel through at the weekend. And at the times that they've travelled, they don't see anybody working on site. So I suppose that comes back to the question about sort of work patterns, but by potentially the visibility of the work that's ongoing as well. Can anybody comment on that?
I'd very much similar answer to what we've already talked about with respect to the shift patterns. I mean, there are works done at different times. The operatives may not always be in the most obvious part of the work area. If people are driving past and seemingly there aren't operatives on site. Clearly 9 p.m. at night is not within our, or 6 a.m. are not within our current shift hours. There are guys out on site right now as we speak, replacing lighting columns. And there are some weekend works, but I don't believe we're programmed for every weekend at the moment.
I think all I'd say there is just to emphasize the point. I mean, I know you're looking at the moment at if you increase the hours of working, what kind of yield that might generate. But it's a point I've heard from a number of residents that that visibility that the works are ongoing is always, it's an immense frustration to all of us, right? When we see roadworks that are constraining our journeys and then seemingly there isn't actually activity ongoing. So I'm sure you recognize that frustration like any other human.
Absolutely. I am a road user. Yes, I would also sit in my car frustrated.
Okay.
So yes, we do recognise and understand that.
I guess one question that's been raised a few times, so I won't attribute it to any individual speaker, but I picked it up in different hues, is given that you've pointed out the kind of critical nature of the works on the roundabout in terms of the water ingress issues, notwithstanding the wider safety changes, why has it taken so long to get these works to happen? I know COVID interrupted, and so you may want to say a bit about that, but given that COVID interrupted, the sort of supplementary related question is why did the works begin so late in summer rather than taking advantage of the lower traffic patterns associated with the summer holidays, which would have obviously lessened the impact on many residents?
I can start with this. So we did start works in the summer holidays. Kick-off, if you want to call it that, was 3rd of August. But we had to be careful about what we could actually do in August due to international rugby events at Twickenham, and that's something that we've been working with the borough and the Rugby Football Union with as well.
So just to dwell on that. So you don't think it was possible to bring the works further forward because of those internationals?
Yes, sorry, absolutely, yeah.
I can probably just add a bit more context to that. So yeah, there was a couple of events over August, the month of August, across various weekends relating to those rugby games at Twickenham Stadium. We received an event list from Twickenham Stadium which outlined their capacity, their expected capacity. We was looking at, I think 80,000 is the full capacity. So they were the sort of numbers that we was looking at. So it was going to bring in a significant increase of road users during those times. So we took the decision to avoid starting works in case we had to pull off the network, and then it would, as you can imagine, elongate the program and elongate the disruption. So yeah, that's why that decision was taken.
Okay, thanks. There's a few questions relating to the project timeline. So clearly they're lengthy timelines that have a lot of people anxious. I mean, the worst disruption as it stands at the moment, you're anticipating to finish, as you said in your presentation, mid-December. And then, of course, the works are anticipated to continue with a roundabout reinstated until June. How confident are you in the timescales that you've put out there? Because clearly, if there's anxiety about them, what I'm sensing from a number of the resident postings is clearly that's one thing. But if these things take longer still than even anticipated, then the anxiety is heightened. How much confidence and how are you ensuring that you will be able to meet those timelines?
Yeah, so I'll take this one again. Yeah, we're in a good place at the moment. We're making good progress. There have been a couple of glitches in regard to bridge debt, but nothing to worry about and bring concern to the public. Our current timelines, we are a couple of days ahead on schedule, so we're working well on our set out program. So then I guess in terms of what we're doing in terms of governance to maintain those timelines is constant work with our contractor, looking at ways we can condense. We've also got the conversations ongoing about extending the working hours as well. So yeah, anything that we can to obviously stick to those timelines, we are doing in the background.
Someone said that the southbound Kew Road Kew Road southbound section is feeding into Manor Circus, is taking quite a lot of the Sandicombe Road closure. Is there any prospect of suspending the bus lane outside Tesco's on the Kew Road to support some of the additional volumes on Kew Road?
I think we would be nervous about suspension of bus lanes actually deteriorating the bus service even further, and given the efficiency of movement and encouraging people to use the bus rather than driving, I think we would probably not want to do that, Rosie.
Yeah, that would be my ideal answer. But yeah, I understand that it's kind of that, again, it's that balance between what impact that would have to the bus network, to the kind of capacity and delay overall. But yeah, from a bus network perspective, it would be preferable to keep it as a bus lane.
Okay. I've been asked a question by Diana Collins, which is, I mean, I don't know whether you'll know the exact number, TfL or Richmond Council officers, but prior to the work starting, how many meetings were held between TfL and Richmond Council to plan traffic management? I mean, I think the actual number is perhaps incidental. I mean, I believe and I understand that the dialogue was good and effective. Clearly, it didn't result in the right outcomes on day one in terms of the changes. But the supplementary point, I guess, is they mentioned that Google Maps, Waze, and so on were not informed, and therefore traffic was rerouted. I don't know whether TfL or Richmond Council officers want to comment off the back of that, but my understanding is that these technology providers, if the roads are available, then those roads are, though they can be algorithmed up or down in terms of the kind of preference afforded them, and not going to be excluded. And so no amount of prior planning in terms of engaging with these technology providers would have resulted in side roads being, you know, non-presentable options to drivers with sat-nav systems as alternatives to a heavily gridlocked A316. But perhaps, you know, transport officers from either side, if you've got anything extra you want to add to that, please do.
I think that's absolutely right, Councillor. It is a challenge. Obviously, we have a relationship with Google and Waze, and we work with them to ensure that the closure of Sandycombe Road was represented as soon as it went in. But yeah, they would normally say that if you want to prevent traffic going down a road, they would expect you to close it rather than change their algorithms.
Okay. So just on the point I made about Kew Road earlier on the southbound aspect, is anyone undertaking sort of monitoring of volumes on Kew Road as part of assessing the impact of the Sandycombe Road closure?
So we receive data around traffic flows right across London. So we will be looking at that. I mean, really, in terms of real-time monitoring, it's generally done through our control centre and through feedback from drivers and from bus drivers. But that we're not. I don't believe we're producing a specific report on that, but it will be feeding into our decision making.
Okay. Let me try and get a question or in an area that we haven't already had. When do we think the bus services that were pre these works might return to near enough normality?
As the delays decrease, so I suppose in that next phase of works that are going to sort of start in December, if the delays decrease significantly and enough to put it back to normal, then we 100% will. But yeah, it will kind of mimic the phases of works and as we go through. But yeah, it's our priority to get the bus network back to normal as soon as we can, really.
Okay. I've got some questions on the home-based site, which I was already covered off. Somebody says when they drove down the A316 last week, they didn't see a warning sign relating to disruption until they got to Richmond Circus. So perhaps just off the back of that, it might make sense to talk a little bit briefly about the extensions to sort of forward warning signage. And I think at our instigation or our request, we've also sought, I think, and TfL have adjusted the kind of constant references to Manor Circus, which, you know, to residents may be relatively well known, but to many users is not. And so sort of perhaps more widely publicising that the corridor itself, the A316 corridor, is facing significant disruption. So someone from TfL want to sort of cover off how that evolved.
Yeah, so I'll take this one. Yeah, so we did expand out some VMS in the Richmond Borough. I think we've got all 4 veins, arms of the network leading into Manor Circus covered. We had some additional ones further out, I think A205. We've also looked at extending these out further now onto highway, the old Highways England, I think National Highways they're called now, network. So that's the main M roads that are in close proximity to the works in the borough, warning them that coming to Richmond, and especially the A316, it would cause significant delays. So we did initially have an area covered, but we have expanded that area now due to the disruption and impact that we're facing.
Okay, that's helpful. I suppose the general point is for TfL, and maybe Nick O'Donnell or Camillus might also want to comment. If we take a moment of brief introspection and say, what do we think we got cumulatively wrong at the first step? What are your views? I mean, for what it's worth, I think it was probably the desire, as was referred to earlier, to try and keep all four arms of the roundabout functioning, primarily, I think, to accommodate bus movements. But do you want to comment further, TfL?
No, I think that would be my assessment, Councillor. I think we were probably optimistic around the level of disruption we thought we'd experience, and we believe that with the connected, with the online temporary signals, we'd be able to manage that level of disruption. That clearly wasn't the case. That's why we moved so swiftly to close Sandycombe Road in order to simplify that operation. Yeah, as you say, it was really the decision was made with the best of intentions. It was intended to balance the needs of all road users, including buses, but also local resident access, and obviously sort of strategic movement up and down the 316. And I think, as I say, in hindsight is a wonderful tool. We should have moved to a more robust management on day one, and we apologise for that.
Anything from the Richmond Council officer side?
We just concur with what he just said. That is correct. Like, there was an ambition to try and maintain all four arms to satisfy all stakeholders' needs, but obviously that wasn't the right decision, and so lessons will be learned.
Okay, thanks very much. I got a question from Alan Benson, who said that he's had some accessibility issues relating to the crossings, and the present crossings need a button to be pressed, and that isn't something that many wheelchair or scooter users can do easily. I understand TfL have been working on a solution to that, a technology solution, but I don't know whether TfL have got anything further to say on that.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll pick this up. Yes, myself, I've been liaising with Alan on this since it was raised last November, and we've been meeting with him frequently on site. Completely understand the issue. It's not something that we've faced on our network before. Therefore, it's not as simple as taking something off the shelf. Technology-wise, we are currently trying to implement a trial, and I'm welcoming people to participate in that trial, but we are having some technical issues right now, which I'm trying to resolve as soon as possible. I do apologise for the delay.
Just to talk about that technology a little bit, because obviously some other people might be interested. So it's something that automatically changes the pedestrian signal as you approach it. So it's like a sensor, I think. Is that right, Sam? And it's quite a good, exciting new technology that we would love to trial, because I'm sure it will be impactful on the rest of the schemes in the network. I think what we need are people to volunteer to test it. So if obviously you're finding it difficult to push buttons, that might be a really good thing to help us with. Just to put that out there.
Okay. Someone's asked, because I'm conscious we're sort of, I'll take a couple more questions, but we're sort of knocking on the end of our time, which we'll try and finish promptly on Q2. But one person's asked whether there might be an opportunity to reconvene in some form later, in about a month's time or so. I mean, what I would say to that is that there is constant dialogue between TfL and Richmond Council officers and myself. And if another meeting is necessary because there's a significant impact, a worsening in any way of the transport situation, then certainly that is an option on the table. I would hope that we'll continue to see measures deployed that will improve on the transport situation, but clearly that remains on the table. I don't know whether TfL want to say anything further about sort of desire for a follow-up meeting.
I think we would agree with what you have just said, and also if we can save some of the questions from this session, we can go through them. We've got FAQs that we're constantly refreshing on the website, so hopefully we'll be able to answer questions as they come. And obviously do please phone us if you're having issues, because our contact centre are briefed on this, and they can also log issues and give us that live information. So yeah, if another meeting is appropriate, then of course we would facilitate that.
Yeah, I noticed that although I've touched on the request on Sheen Gate before, I noticed there are some follow-up questions relating to that. And I just want to say, look, for the avoidance of doubt, Royal Parks control Richmond Park and Bushy Park. They're not under the control of Transport for London or indeed Richmond Council. The point I made earlier is they were contacted by a ward councillor asking for their view. Councillor Cambridge very kindly got in touch with them asking for their view on how they would feel about opening up Sheen Gate, and they've made very clear that that's not something they intend to do and want to do. So I think we just have to accept, whether we like it or not, that the controlling authority, much like if one of us were asked whether or not we'd be happy with rerouting traffic across, the frontage of our house, if we don't want that to happen, nobody else is in a position to force that upon us. I think the other thing to just recognise as well is that that's even if Royal Parks were minded to do that, we would have significant concerns about that too, because it would mean routing traffic, significant amounts of traffic back through East Sheen's residential road network to get to Sheen Gate, and I think the residents of Parkside and East Sheen would have quite understandably some strong things to say about that too. The important thing for us to do, and has been the focus of our energies to date, has been to get the 316 functioning to the best possible capability that it can to afford traffic to travel on it freely, and that will diminish the need for drivers to seek to try and get off onto residential roads, which is clearly a desirable outcome. I've got just a couple more questions before we bring it to a close. Can TfL clarify what's going on with the 371 route? I've asked several drivers, but no one seems to have a definitive answer. No service at all until station for several days, and then from Manor Circus after 10 AM from last weekend. However, on Tuesday morning, no service at all, even from the station. This particular person, it says they're disabled, and the service is their only means of getting their son to school, and the cost of taxi is obviously prohibitive. Could we have an update on the 371 service?
Yeah, so from the plan changes, there should only be structural changes to the R68, the R70 and the 110. So the cutbacks, the extension and diversion Stanicum Road. So any change to the 317 will be used for like live service control. So I'll take that away and talk to the operator and kind of maybe get them to hopefully manage that a bit better and keep more buses running through.
Right. Okay. I am going to just try and see if there's anything else critically that we've missed at the moment. There are hundreds of questions, so I apologize to the many residents that have not specifically had their question answered, but I've tried to give genuinely a fair summary of what's in front of me and that covers the piece. Someone's asked, are we considering closing Stanley Road, Raleigh Road, and what does that mean for residential access? It's very challenging trying to exit and enter as a resident, and there's considerable impact. Well, I think for the moment, the measures are what they are. We are looking at whether or not any additional changes are necessary. The approach I think I've broadly set out, I think TfL would agree, perhaps different language, is very much do review as necessary. And so if further changes are necessary to the road network in order to foster safety or to reduce rat running on residential roads, then we reserve the right to implement them, but we'll do so on a temporary basis, and we'll also be willing to make alterations if necessary. Clearly, for roads that are adversely impacted, it's important to first of all get in touch with your ward councillors and do what best you can to try and put forward a view with the relevant backing of as many residents as possible via a form of a petition or at least some kind of bellwether meeting of views, so that the council would at least be able to enter into it knowing what the breadth of opinion is about potential changes, because clearly one resident may wish to have a road closed, but another may find that an unnecessary impediment to egress or access. And so sadly, in this role of transport. You know, you are damned if you do and you're damned if you don't often. TfL, do you want to add anything to sort of potential other measures? I think everything pretty much remains on the table, right? We can and will do more if necessary.
Absolutely agree with that fully, Councillor.
Okay. I've got one question which says, and perhaps it's maybe the point at which we end. There are no enforcement officers along Manor Road advising drivers to turn off engines, especially during rush hour when kids are walking to school. I think all I can say to that is, you know, we have asked enforcement officers to go down and prioritise the residential roads in the area during peak times where there is stacked traffic, and if they're not seen on certain roads and we need to prioritise them, if you can give us an idea of the times, particularly where the impacts will happen, please feel free to email me and we'll try and make sure as best possible, given the finite resources of our enforcement officers, that we're able to get some people to go down and do some work advising people to switch off wherever possible. I think that we have not even, you know, broken the back of over what are still 300 open questions, many of which that do touch on the subjects that we've so far questioned, but I'm conscious that we said we'd finish at 1:45, and I think it's right to give people back their evenings. What I would say to any residents out there that still have questions that haven't been answered either by the presentation or by the question and answer session that followed is feel free to get in touch with myself. My details are on the Richmond Council website, cllr.councillor.a.amann, EHMANN @richmond.gov.uk. If I can't answer something, I'll of course field it to relevant officers either of the council or TfL. TfL have supplied within their presentation, I think, contact details that are available, and rest assured we are in constant and continual dialogue between Richmond Council and TfL to see whether or not there's more we can do to try and get these works to have as minimal an impact on your lives as possible. I simply end, unless TfL wish to add anything further, by saying that it is unfortunately a sad reality that this Manor Road roundabout does require the works. They're important works. I hope residents have understood the necessity of those works, and we're seeking to try and make the impacts as minimally damaging as possible. But it is simply not possible to continue to provide the same level of road movement freedom as was the case prior to the work. So we're looking at minimising impact, but we cannot eliminate it. TfL, do you have anything you want to say in summary? I just end by saying once again, on behalf of Richmond Council, I apologise for any disruption and ask for your continued forbearance during these works, which are sadly necessary.
I think we'd just like to really echo those comments. And again, please do get in touch with us. As you say, it sometimes feels like I think you're shouting into the ether, phoning us and telling us, but that does give us a broad picture of where the impacts are and what people's opinions is and the various mitigations. And again, as you say, like we can implement one thing and then see how it changes. And I'd also like to echo your apology that these works are disruptive. But yeah, please do continue to give us feedback, I think is the main thing we would like to stress. Absolutely, yeah. So keep the feedback coming. It's constructive, it's helpful. I've had many good dialogues, face to face and over the phone with people, as well as by email correspondence, and quite happy to continue that. I hope people understand that this is a complicated matrixed project that has some challenges, but that we are all working to try and minimise the level of disruption. And please do, in the first instance, get in touch with your ward councillors, who I have to say across the entire area have been sterling advocates for you. I would say that, of course, but they genuinely have. And so thank you to them. Thank you to residents that have taken the time to get in touch with us in TfL. We don't take bruises from it. We take genuine constructive feedback from it. And I hope you've seen that we have acted and will continue to do so. So thank you for your time this evening, and do continue to stay in touch with us. Thank you.